Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrive by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 223, we sit down with Judy McCleery, photographer, writer, longtime community leader, and lifelong North Forker, whose story is deeply woven into the fabric of the East End. Judy takes us back to her family's arrival on the North Fork and her upbringing in Mattituck, sharing vivid memories of growing up here and how that sense of place shaped who she would become. From her years at Mattituck High School to her early work in public service, we trace a path that reflects both curiosity and commitment to the community. Over the course of her career, Judy has worn many hats: recycling coordinator for the Town of Southampton, legislative aide in the early 1990s, bank employee in Greenport, a radio professional, and later a reporter and photographer, each chapter offering a different window into life on the North Fork and the people who make it run. We also talk about her involvement in local politics, the East End Women's Network, and her ongoing dedication to civic life, culminating in her current role as president of North Fork Chamber of Commerce. Throughout the conversation, Judy reflects on why this place matters so deeply to her, what she hopes the future holds for the North Fork and its community. So I hope you enjoy episode 223 with Judy McCleery. This episode was recorded over 2 days in August and September. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really great to have you on today.
Well, great to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Definitely. And so in the beginning, I usually like to start off, if you can give us a little background about yourself, starting with your roots and a bit about your family's ancestry.
Well, so I was... my family moved out here in 1968. My father was a clergyman. He was an Episcopal priest, and a parish came open in Mattituck, Church of the Redeemer in Mattituck. And we had moved around a lot in the 60s. I have a sister who's 10 years older, so my parents were trying to find good school and good, a good opportunity. We were all over the place, actually. When I was born, we were summering at Gilgo Beach. We had a beach house there, and that was really great. I kind of, love the beach and love being around the water. I think that's why I love the North Fork so much, because it's all around us. Mm-hmm. And, we jumped around from the time I was a baby until I was 5 years old. We went from College Point, which is where his parish was, from College Point to Caribou, Maine, to Bell Harbor, to Northport, and then we ended up out here. Now, my poor sister, she did all that moving when she was a tween. And, so that was what did I say, 4 or 5 places in 4 years, right? But then we settled here on the North Fork, and my sister married into the Sider family, so she became a local. I'm just halfway local because I didn't marry into a local family. And my maiden name is Baker, so anybody who's listening remembers my father, Father Charles Baker, Carl Baker, but he retired in 1986, so that was quite a while ago. But my family is originally from Brentwood, when Brentwood was really a farming community. My father was involved in the defense industry. He worked on the P-47 Thunderbolts, was a World War II veteran, and actually he survived it, but he was a POW in Germany in World War II, and that inspired him. What happened to him there inspired him to become a clergyman, and it was quite a life. It was what I learned about my childhood out here was that a lot of community service, but we also learned that God provides. I mean, we never wanted for anything. And there were times, churches aren't always making a lot of money. There are some lean years, but there was always, somebody who helped us as a family, be a family. But, we pay it back by, helping the community, and we involved with a lot of stuff that way. And Mattituck really felt like home, and it still does, even though I live in Southold.
Yes. And then did your mom work as
Oh,
well?
so my mom, yeah, I guess I was. My mother was a housewife.
Hmm.
She didn't work. She raised us. Her her family on her side, it was initially farming,
Hmm.
the Taylor farm, and that was really Brentwood was a farm, truly a farming community. And as I mentioned off air, I have a picture of my mother standing in the middle of Wicks Road, and it was a dirt road,
Mm.
and she wasn't getting run over. And that's how Brentwood was. It was like we used to be here in the 70s and 80s, a real farming community, and real close knit community. So my mother was a tailor. That was the name of the family. Not although she did teach me how to sew, but the Taylor farm.
Mhm.
And back in the early 20th century, the women, once they got married, raised the kids,
Mhm.
raised the family. The fortunate part was that because my dad was a clergyman, he worked out of the house really. So he was around all the time. He didn't, leave the house at 8 o'clock in the morning and come home at 5 and sit there, knife and fork in hand and feed me, kind of thing. He was around all the time. And I feel really, really fortunate to have had my parents around, real family thing. I had a great childhood. I loved growing up on the North Fork.
Mhm. And could you talk about even some of the activities or things you would do as a child or
We rode our bikes and we swam in the pool because we had a pool just because it was easier sometimes than, packing up the kids to go to the
Mhm.
beach. We loved the pool. And besides that, there was no jellyfish or crabs in the pool and we still got to swim. Really, we were water rats, loved to swim, loved to be, we'd go out on the boat. A funny story, I don't know who may remember Greg Sachs, the NASCAR
Mm.
racer. I guess I'm going back a ways, but and so my sister, who's 10 years older, her name is Alice. She's a cider now, Alice Cider. She came, we got an inheritance, and she used her money to buy a boat, and she would spend. Her days on the Peconic Bay water skiing or, boating. And I did that too when I got old enough to do so on a different boat. But this boat in particular, she bought, I like to say, I mean, this is very tongue in cheek, but I like to say that our family helped Greg Sachs create his NASCAR career because before he sold his boat in order to buy his first race car.
Mhm.
And anybody in Mattituck remembers the Sachs family, I think. But anyway, so we are directly responsible for everything that Greg Sachs did. No, not really. But it was fun to watch the NASCAR races. I'm kind of into cars too. And we had a great time on that boat. Went fishing, would go sit out in the middle of the bay with a fishing pole in the water and just hope you'd get some snappers or bluefish or whatever came our way. And, that was my father who really made sure we did a lot of that. What else did we do? Well, I lived near the Mattituck High School, the school grounds, lived on Mary's Road. So in the summer, we would go up there and play tennis on the tennis courts and sometimes hit the balls against the wall. I can't tell you how many tennis balls were probably found on the roof of the boys' side of the gymnasium. There are plenty of them, I'm sure. But other than that, I didn't really like tennis. My
Mm.
sister loved tennis. She's 10 years old, so we didn't spend a lot of time together. I'm talking about me and the neighborhood kids. There was a big field next to the house where, because it was the church rectory, so it
Mhm.
wasn't the family house, but I grew up in that house on Mary's Road, and it was on the corner of Mary's Road and Route 48. And the Cider family did have a couple of cows, they had a horse, they had some pigs, and they grew alfalfa there. And we used to, play in that field. Kids would never do this today, but we
No.
used to play in that field. And as cars went by, we would dive so they would hide. We'd hide from them. So we couldn't. They wouldn't see us. It was quite a game, but we were filthy and dirty and it was great at the end of the day. We rode our bikes everywhere all over town, rode to all the beaches once we were old enough, and I will say it was quiet. So
Mhm.
as we got older, as you got into your tweens, 12, 13, 14, you wanted to break away from your parents a little bit more. It was a little hard to do that. I mean, you didn't have
Mhm.
back then, this was the 70s really, you didn't have play dates. You went over a friend's house, you had dinner, you had a sleepover, something like that, but you really didn't have something where the mom set it up or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't a lot to do. I like to use the phrase that back then in Mattituck, and I guess truly on the whole North Fork, maybe not Greenport. Greenport was a little bit more active. You used to roll up the sidewalks at 9:00. I mean, you couldn't even get a cup of coffee or a soda. I remember my first job was at the A&P. Who remembers the A&P? It's the marketplace now in Mattituck. It was my first job, and I can remember getting off work at 9:00, and my mother would have to make sure that there was, that she had something for me to eat because I didn't have dinner. We couldn't. Sometimes we'd take a ride to 7-Eleven to get a snack or something, or to get a soda, but that only 7-Eleven was in Cutjog, and that was it. I can remember the very first stoplight in Mattituck. The very first one in Southold Town in general, I believe, was at Youngs Avenue in Southold, Youngs Avenue and Main Road, right there where IGA is in the Silversmiths Corner. But in Mattituck, the first stoplight they put up on Route 48 and Wickham Avenue, and that was in 1981. And it was all a buzz. People weren't used to it. Tragically, there were accidents too until people got used to it. But that's how small and really, I don't want to say insulated because I don't mean that, but we were close knit and everybody knew it was safe to move around the town. And, when we used to go to, I wasn't a smoker, but, the kids who would smoke in school, the school lunch break, they would go down to Love Lane, and really it was on Pike Street, and it was a little deli. It was it was called Schnitzels. We called it Schnitzels. It was some Turkish guy. I can't even remember his real name now. It was that long ago, but he never asked for ID, and the kids would get their cigarettes and then, go back to school with it in their pockets and that kind of thing. The cigarettes weren't as taboo as they are now, But there was what we called a smoker's box, where all the kids who smoked had to go to this box that was probably about half the size of the room we're sitting in now. And they all had to, they had to be in that box in order to smoke. If they were outside the box, they got detention. It was very, so I'm all over the map. Sorry about that. But, what was it like growing up? Those are the things I remember. I remember it was a big deal to go out to dinner. My parents, when went someplace special, they'd go to the Anchor Inn, which is right next to the old mill. Okay. And the Anchor Inn's gone. It burned down in the 70s, actually. But Old Mill was a fancy place to go. Mitchell's, that's where Mitchell's Park is now. So, and Porky's. Porky's is the Lynn Beach House.
Yes.
That's right. And so those were a big deal. Like, if you were going shopping, we're going to Riverhead. That was a big deal too. The other big deal was Smith Haven Mall. Going up to Smith Haven Mall was an all-day excursion, and it was an event, for sure. Yeah. So I played Barbies. I rode my bike. I played tennis and learned that I didn't like it. I was really into animals too. So we had pet rabbits, and we had a way for we had a fence. So my father built this hutch. I can't believe no predators got her, but built this hutch for her. We let her. Her name was Flopsy, after the tale of Peter Cottontail, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. I loved that story, and so. We would let her run around in the fenced-in area. It was a pretty big area because we had a pool. That's why we had the backyard fenced in, and it was an above-ground pool. It wasn't any one of these fancy in-ground things. It was a very 70s pool, and from Harrow's, if you remember Harrow's, and she'd run around, and he would whistle and tap his foot at night when it was time to come in. I know, very counterintuitive for a rabbit, right? And she'd come over, he'd pick her up, put her in the hutch that was tall enough for predators like raccoons and stuff, and he had it in special latches and locks so that nothing could get in for her. And those are the things I remember, the wildlife. And my mother was a wildlife rehabilitator before they had that term, so everybody was calling us for, Mrs. Baker, we found a bird in the grass. Mrs. Baker, there's a possum, his mother got hit by a car, that kind of thing. And we were always taking care of them. That was really nice. It was great to see nature, to be part of nature in that way, to help it along. And one of the things I remember vividly is that there were no deer. We had no deer out here.
Yes.
And and I remember the first time seeing a deer on the North Fork. I was in my 20s by then. It was at night, and I was driving over by what the locals call Manor Hill, over by Pellegrini Vineyard in Cutchogue there, between Mattituck and Cutchogue. And it ran in front of me and I clipped it. And I'm like, the first time I see a deer, I'm running into it, right? But now, of course, that's very different.
Yes.
Hard to say why. I'm not I never studied that part of it. That's not me, but that was 70s on the North Fork.
Yes.
What else would you like to know?
Well, I was even curious, into your teens, would you hang out on Love Lane or?
No,
No.
not really Love Lane. Love Lane was a real business district, you know.
Okay.
There weren't restaurants there, not that I can remember. What was the one? There was L&L Market, which is where Lombardi's is, the Mattituck Market. Well, no, what is it? Is it called Lombardi's?
Lombardi's.
Yeah, I drew a blank. But it was a grocery store, and it was called L&L.
Okay.
And that remind me to talk to you about boat people. I'll tell you that in a second. But around the corner on Pike Street near Schnitzel's was a cafe called the Coffee Pot. There was a deli where Amoratti's is. That was always a deli. And there was a deli there. You could go in and get get whatever. You didn't really order sandwiches because L&L, you got cold cuts. You didn't order sandwiches and that kind of thing. You ordered the cold cuts and Mom made them at home. So it was a lot of business. Like there was by the yard. The Yorges family had this. It was a fabric store, and we were all. I mean, it was huge. It was that was where the sweet shop is, Love Lane Sweet Shop.
Yes.
And it was packed and it was busy, and they were, everybody, actually, that was their second location. Their first location was where Mint is, that little place. And then they outgrew it. That's how big it was. So anyway, no, you didn't hang out on Love Lane, I'll tell you, but I'm going to get back to the boat people in a second. So you hung out at the A&P parking lot. Everybody hung out there, with their cars, whoever had a car, that kind of thing, beer in the, in the back seat or whatever. We weren't, I never liked beer, so we always got Boone's Farm Country Quencher was the one that we liked. And you'd go to the Bay. Who remembers what the Bay is? I may be giving away a secret here, but the Bay was Veterans Park.
Okay.
Okay, or Veterans Beach, whatever. But that we called it the Bay, and to this day, you call it the Bay. And that's that beach, the Bay. You Breakwater, Bailey's, the Bay. Sometimes that was actually as we got a little older and old enough to drink. Drinking age was 18 when I came of age. So, but you'd hang out in the parking lot, a whole bunch of cars, the hot rods get together, you hang out in the parking lot, A&P parking lot. Now, the heads, that is the potheads and all the ones that, the druggies, and that none of that was really very serious. They hung out at North Fork Deli, which is now Center Cuts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They had a game room, pinball machines, and some video games, and that was a big deal back then. So they all went there, smoked their pot, I guess, because I didn't hang out with any of them at all. I was one of the college-bound Regents kids, and so I had the job, and I saw all the kids hanging out in the parking lot. Yeah, I'd go get the Country Quencher, but that was less of a thing than, I didn't hit the books that much, but I was a little bit more serious than all that. Now, the other place we would go is the Lanes. That was the bowling alley, which is where CVS is. They had video games as well, and you could bowl, and it was, you didn't have to be 18 to drink and all that. So you could go there and hang out. And we did a lot of that. We did a lot of bowling, and I was terrible at it. Bowling and tennis, don't ask me. Don't bother. Not good at either one. And we would go and play video games. The one that was there that everybody loved was Space Invaders, but also Asteroids. And Asteroids was a lot of fun. This was when there were these big, tall machines. They weren't in your hands. You had to spend a hard-earned $1, and that was a lot back then to play this game. But you played it for a bit, and when you got good, you could actually run the table, as it were. So no, we didn't hang out on Love Lane. But now let me get to the boat people. Love Lane was very close. This is why it had a hardware store, Orlowski's now, but it was Rainer Suter back then. The train station was right there. It still is, right? The building isn't even there anymore. Levine Stationery Store, and because they were Jewish, they were open on Sundays, and that's where everybody would go to get their rolls for eggs, for their for their egg breakfast on Sunday morning. Here we were, as the church was right around the corner, so that was kind of a day for us. We'd have people back at the house after church, and so that was where you got your hard rolls, and that was a big Sunday deal. But the boat people you have the train station, you had the hardware store, you had L&L Market, that was a full grocery store. Mm-hmm. You had Barker's Drugstore, which is where the Fiber Arts is right now.
Okay.
And there was a variety store, which is where Roanoke Vineyard is now, the little tasting room for Roanoke. And you had the bank. We didn't have ATMs then, but you had the bank. So if you went north to that little marina, mm-hmm. It's not much of a marina anymore, but there was a marina at the north end of Love Lane across 48. Mm-hmm. So it's now it's a town park. Wait a minute, it might be Mattituck Park District Park. That's a difference. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between them. Let's pay attention, right? It's kind of like the village of Greenport, and you have Greenport beaches and you have town beaches, that kind of thing. So this was similar, Park District Beach or park, I should say. Anyway, there was a boat ramp, but there was also a marina, and people would come, and people who had their boats, their cabin cruisers and things. And we had a really active marine community in that regard. Strong's was huge. They mm-hmm. still are, but they mm-hmm. were a real part of the community, kind of huge. Like, everybody had a boat at Strong's. Everybody had a boat. Mm-hmm. And so they would need to get provisions. So they would have these carts and their kids and their dogs, and they'd come in groups up Love Lane, and they were the stuck-up ones because they had all the money. They were from out of town, and we kind of looked down our nose at them. Oh, look, there's the boat people. They're crowding the place again. You'll never get in the place. The boat people are going to be there. So, that was, I don't know who's listening who might remember that, yeah. But, anybody who does, call the library and let Chris know so I can know who you are.
Yes.
So, it was really quiet.
Mm-hmm.
You spent time with your family, you spent time with your friends, you're outdoors, you just hung around and enjoyed the great outdoors, enjoyed the North Fork. And in the winter, you played in the snow. In the summer, you played at the beach. We didn't go away much. We did. Everyone goes away, goes vacation. We go every year. I know we were talking off mic before the show about how hot it is in New Orleans. Well,
yes.
My father would always get a month off, and we'd go in July because that's when kids are off. Mm-hmm. And we'd go to Disney World. And I'm like, I don't know how my parents survived it, because I would never go to Disney World in July. I'm not sure I'd go to Disney World in December, but I definitely wouldn't go in July. When we camped, we had a little camper. We used to hang out in a little pop-up camper too. We had a camper, and we would travel down and camp at Jellystone Park, which is right next to Disney World. Disney World had just opened, in the early 70s. So it was just the basics. There was no Epcot. It was just the Magic Kingdom, and it was fun. We had a great time. I can't believe we camped at a campground right next to alligators and stuff like that, but we did. And my parents had to have been worried. I didn't know anything about it, thank heavens, because I probably would never have left the camper or the car. But that's so those are the kinds of things you did, and then you talked about it when you went back to school.
Yes.
And
getting into high school, how was that experience? And
so that was a little bit more social,
Okay.
You had your little cliques, and you had your cliques, and you had teachers you hated, teachers you liked, things you liked to get involved with. But it was small. I know they're smaller now, but my graduating class in Mattituck High School was 120, and that was small for Long Island then. It's probably big. Like, what was Greenport in the past couple of years? Like in the 60s or 70s,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, something like that. So what'd you do? You joined clubs.
Mm-hmm.
You tried out for teams. I tried out for the volleyball team. Barbara Brandy was the coach. I didn't make it. Barbara Brandy's still local, I think. She's floating around somewhere. But you had... I was never much into sports. I got into the theater stuff. We had a variety show. Greenport did a lot of that stuff too. But Mattituck was just such a great community. We didn't go too far beyond it. when I was in fourth grade, Mattituck and Cutchogue merged, so it became the Mattituck Cutchogue School District, but it was still the Mattituck High School. So after fourth grade, the kids went, because that Cutchogue was running out of room. So after fourth grade, all the kids came to Mattituck, and Cutchogue became just the primary, kindergarten through third. And so you made those friends in high school. And then Sacred Heart School, the Catholic school in Cutchogue, what is it now, the Pecana Community School?
Yes.
That was then, so when it was Sacred Heart, they ended at sixth grade. So, and 12th and seventh grade, when you were 12, you came to Mattituck, because if you were in Cutchogue, you came to Mattituck. You went to your school district, right? And so there was a lot of shuffling that way. Once you got into junior high, as it was seventh grade, those social structures changed a little bit. So again, you spent time with your friends. You went off and did something with your friends. So there were a lot of clubs in Mattituck, right? So after school stuff, you had the yearbook. So some people were into photography. Mike Cortez was a photographer in addition to being a science teacher. So it was a no-brainer for him to be, putting together the yearbook. So some of us had cameras. I wasn't part of that. Some of us learned how to lay it out and put it together. Then there was the wrestling club. We had a really strong wrestling team. So some of us were cheerleaders for the wrestling club. There were cheerleaders, obviously. It was a lot of, sports and clubs, and 4-H was active. The Girl Scouts were active. I spent a little bit, I was a Brownie. I was Scouts early, but then I got more into, it was stuff going on at church. I should probably bring that up too. When my father first moved here, my father's part of his ministry was very active with youth. Now, this was in the early 70s, late 60s. And there was that hippie drug culture that they were trying to counteract, because they wanted kids to do more wholesome things, and kids needed something to do out here, because you were either farming. There was drag racing and stuff too. 48 was nothing. It was a couple of straightaways, and you had those old hot rods. Those those cars from the 50s and 60s were still in great shape, and some Plymouths and Novas and things like that. Anyway, so the churches would get together and have these big youth group things. Something like they would have a dance in the parking lot, because it was a big parking lot, the Our Lady of Good Counsel Catholic Church. And this wasn't just Mattituck. This was North Fork wide, the whole North Fork. We would, in my father's church of the Redeemer, had a nice little basement. They called it the Undercroft. So they would make like little coffee houses where you'd have these, curtains up in little cubicles so kids could, talk and, and under supervision be a little bit romantic. So it wasn't all that crazy hippie stuff that you'd have just if you're out on the street kind of thing, right? Yeah. So it was that we're starting to see the transition, the freedom of the 70s, the women's lib and everything was coming out. So that was a big thing to do. Environmental stuff. I remember, that was when you had the Indian who said, "Don't litter," and you'd seen him on TV with a tear coming down his eye. Do you remember him, Chris?
No.
I can't remember his name, but it was this Indian, it was a commercial on TV, "Please don't litter." And so you'd see scenes of all this litter on the side of the road, and he'd be looking at it, and then it'd be a close-up of him with a tear streaming down his cheek, like, "Why are you doing this? It's terrible." So it made us feel guilty, and we started, picking up after ourselves, that kind of thing. So there was that movement. We started to see that movement towards caring about our environment a little bit more, and that was just starting back then. So now, where was I going? So what was it like? Oh, so what were some of the other things we did? Yeah. So there was the hot rodding thing, and then at 4-H, I learned to sew in home ec. I loved it, and I also part of home ec was, boys had to take home ec and the girls had to take shop. So I learned that I didn't like anything to shop but the cars. I was into cars. My older sister, she had a couple of nice cars in the day. I remember she was 10 years older. So when I was 12, she was 22, and she, she had a Triumph at one time, and they were all used. Oh, she had a Camaro. She had a couple of Camaros. Oh, boy, if we still had those cars, we'd be retired and sitting pretty if we could, right? However, and then as you got into high school, again, you had more of the cliques, the boyfriends, the girlfriends, who you're hanging out with. There was a lot more of the club thing. I got active in German. And so my father's mother was German, born in Germany, and came over to the United States as a child. And I never knew her. She died before I was born. My parents were 40 when they had me. So it was almost like having parents and grandparents at the same time. It was great. I loved, my parents were great. But I never knew my grandmother. And here's why I bring this up. So, she taught my father and all of his brothers and sisters German. And I never really learned German. I wasn't really interested in German. I was dying to learn French. And I had one of my good friends, by the time we got to sophomore year, Claire Lundstedt, if you're out there listening, she was the salutatorian of the class, and she had taken French in the early years. I took Spanish. My parents said, take Spanish. And anybody who went to Mattituck remembers Jimmy DeGons was a Spanish teacher, and he was an interesting guy. He learned Spanish by being stationed in Puerto Rico before, but his big thing was he was in a band. He ran a band, so he did the job, the Spanish classes, because that was his day job. But his passion was his music. So he wasn't the greatest teacher, but he was fun. And so anyway, I learned Spanish, and I was dying to learn French. And my parents said I could take French after I took Spanish. So here we were. Claire and I are putting together our classes for junior year. You get to junior year again. It's getting important now. And she begs me to take German because she had already taken French, didn't want to take Spanish. She said she didn't want to take Spanish because she went to med school, and she's a doctor now. She wanted to go to Georgetown Med School, Georgetown pre-med and all that. I was humble. I just went to King's College in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, but she had to go to one of the Ivy League schools, and she said she needed 2 languages, and one of them couldn't be Spanish. I bet you it could have been Spanish, but she just didn't want to take Spanish. Anyway, she begged me to take German. Begged me. And so I said, okay. Finally, I went, okay, I'll take German. She didn't want to be the only upperclassman in a class full of freshmen, because German won. Well, so we both took it. I took it. Brigitte Gibbons was the German teacher. She was very well known, 70s, 80s. She's still out there. Hello, Brigitte, if you're listening. She's German. She's from Germany. She came over here in her 20s and got married and had a family. So anyway, I took German. Claire took German. I took to it like it was my own language. Like it was so easy for me. And I don't know if you believe in reincarnation and stuff. Maybe that was my grandmother is in me somewhere, or she was tapping me on the shoulder, because I excelled in it. I did so well in it that I took 3 years in those 2. I took German 1, 2, 3 so I could qualify for the Regents, and I decided to be a foreign correspondent. I wanted to go to Germany. And Brigitte had said, and other Germans have told me that I speak German with almost no accent. Now, I've lost a lot of my vocabulary, aber wenn ich Deutsch sprechen, ich kann gut Deutsch sprechen. Es war mein Hauptfach in Universität. And that's all I remember now. Now, I actually remember a little bit more, but I don't want to bore your listeners. But so we got involved in that kind of thing. Oh, and by the way, Claire dropped out after half a year because it was ruining her average. I'm going, I took this for you. But, a little bit of that is, how God takes you on journeys, right? So Claire was the vehicle for me to really find one of my life's purposes. I visited Germany a few times. I loved German. I loved studying German. I loved Germany. It was a great chance to see my family's history, learn a little bit more about my grandmother and that kind of thing. So we kept to ourselves, but, had a lot of good friends is what it was like on the North Fork back in the 70s.
And you mentioned you didn't really need to go outside of Mattituck, really, and you had the community there. But would you, when you were in high school, would you go over to Greenport?
Oh,
or
yes.
Southall?
So, yeah, we travel up. There's a funny thing, because you're asking kind of like my high school experience, and that kind of thing. We travel a lot. Sure, you went to Braun's for seafood, or you went to you went to Greenport. Actually, one of the Greenport and Riverhead were the 2 places to shop. And I can remember going to Brandy's Shoes here in Southall, in Greenport, for my shoes, for school. The arcade was a phenomenal place to buy almost anything. And you came to Claudio's was there, Mitchell's, the ferry. If you wanted to go to the South Fork, it was expensive, but you took the ferry because you didn't have to go around. And back then, you didn't have Cross River Drive. You had to go into Riverhead and come back out.
Mm.
And my eldest sister, who I hadn't mentioned, she's 18 years older. She lived in East Hampton at the time. So we would go over there, periodically. And as long as you didn't miss the cutoff, because it stopped running at midnight, it would sometimes be easier to take the ferry across Shelter Island, and it was beautiful,
Yeah.
So we'd go out to the Orient State Park, we would, if we traveled to Connecticut once the ferry started, but that was in the late 70s, really. We would go places, and my family had a family up west, Brentwood. So we would go to Brentwood for family gatherings and things like that, and family would come out to us. So it wasn't all just about the high school. You would hang out a little bit on Loveland, but there was more business minded. Everybody went to the post office. You went to the post office every day to get the mail, say hello to everybody. People still do that. But it wasn't as social. There weren't the restaurants. You went there because you were doing business. You were shopping, and back then you had the small mom and pops. You didn't go to Target to get a toaster. You went to the hardware store.
Yes.
Where the building is gone now, but on that corner, Graby Appliance was there. On the corner of Mattituck, where
the Capital One. No,
not Capital One, where Liberty Data was, and that the building burned down a couple of years ago. It was a tragic fire, but there was, right there on that corner, the big corner where the Presbyterian Church is in Love Lane. That was where the appliance store was, Graby Appliance. You got everything there, so you stayed local. I mean, you might have to go. I mean, people from Southold came to Mattituck for Graby, I imagine. But if you wanted a new lamp, you went to Fraunhofer's in Southold. And the A&P used to be where Handy Pantry is. But it got too big, and they mowed down that field, and it became a big shopping center. The Cardinellis opened up that, and it's a great hub for that. Yes. That was in the mid 70s that happened. So would we go anywhere? Sure. We'd visit Greenport, and we'd cruise the beaches and look at the scenery and do all of those things. We'd sit on the beach and enjoy the beach a lot. But we had a nice place, where we were. So we just stayed at home and enjoyed that. Family dinners, and people would come in and have people over for dinner and that kind of thing. But cars weren't as much of a thing. Like, everybody has a car now. And the trains were a little bit more active. One of the things I remember is the train would come by from Greenport, would come by at 3:00 in the afternoon after I was off of school, and there wasn't. So we could see the train tracks from the house. So I would go into the yard and wave at the train, and the conductor, whoever, would wave back. I mean, it was really it was that kind of Petticoat Junction kind of thing. We called Mattituck Hooterville. But now what I would do for my birthday, which was September 2nd. I'm still around. For my birthday, my father and I would get on the train in Mattituck, and we'd ride east to Greenport. My mother would meet us there. But first, this was, again, how small town even Long Island Railroad was. They would, the conductor would invite us on to the engine, and there was a turntable. Do you remember? The turntable's still there. Yes. Well, it was in use then, and we would get to be in the engine while they ran the turntable. And that was really very cool. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was just big and huge and overwhelmingly. For a little kid, you just look at it like, wow, this is amazing. And you don't realize how amazing it is. I mean, there were boats in the harbor. There were fishing boats. What I remember my first job was in Greenport, North Fork Bank, which is what's over there now? Peconic Bay? No, it's Peconic Bay.
Peconic Bay.
Yeah. That red brick building. And the drive-in was facing Cooper's Fish it's not factory. Cooper's
market.
It wasn't a market. It was right behind it. There was a processing. It was Cooper something. I don't remember. Yeah. But all the
Cooper's fish processing plant.
Yeah, something like that. Does that sound right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure anybody who remembers Cooper's. So anyway, the low teller on the totem pole had to do the drive-through, and I was young and dumb, and Friday nights or even Sunday nights or even Thursday nights, Friday the Friday Eve kind of thing. You'd go out and stay out a little bit late and drink a little bit too much, and you come back. You'd be to work on Friday morning and feeling not quite yourself. And in the summer, you could smell the processing plant, and it was so right there as you opened up the drive-through drawer, and you brought in all that air, and it was hot too. It was in the summer. It was nice and hot, and you pull it in, and all you got was this fish smell, and you're like, oh, I need some hair of the dog kind of thing. But we'd come to Greenport to party. And not in a bad way, but the cinnamon tree is where, what's up there now? Oh, I can't remember the name of, because I don't party in Greenport that much anymore because I'm too old to party. So I can't remember the name of the restaurant that's right there. We're not 1943 Pizza, whatever that restaurant is right behind it. Anyway, in that little square.
That was the cinnamon tree?
That was the cinnamon tree. And, you'd started at this, actually, we're from Mattituck. We started out at the Broken Down Valise, still a great place. Broken Down Valise, very much of a dive bar, but that's where we all met. And then we'd work our way east. Actually, working our way east was, we were either going to the Hamptons or you were going to Greenport. Mm-hmm. So most of the time it was easier because you did have to worry about drinking and driving. And this was the early 80s. You'd head to Greenport. Cinnamon Tree, Claudio's, Mitchell's was still around, and then Mitchell's became Kokomo's. Mm-hmm. Now there's nothing there anymore. It's just the park, which is a great thing. Yes. So you'd prowl around Greenport doing that kind of fun stuff. Maybe the older people, the adults would go to, we were adults too, but we were still kids in our minds. Sometimes they'd go to Porky's because that was a little more of a higher class, more of a restaurant, so it wouldn't be such a bar crowd kind of thing. And we'd prowl the town until it was time to end up back at the Valise to say goodnight to everybody because the bars closed at 4. Do they still close at 4? That's how long it's been since I've been out all night.
I'm not sure. I don't think they do. It might be 2 o'clock.
Yeah? Let's see.
But it was probably a lot more bars in Greenport in the 80s. Yes. And were there still a lot more fishermen and
yes, it was very. In fact, I remember on payday from Cooper's. No matter what time of year, you knew it was Cooper's people. Well, first you saw their checks when we came into the bank, but they smelled of fish. They reeked of fish. But it was fine. That's what you did. It was and I remember there was one. There's a couple people whose husbands worked on fishing boats, so they would of course. I remember a couple of bad storms that we were sitting there chewing our nails, hoping that they were going to come home safely. It was so ubiquitous everywhere, the fishing industry, that it was normal. You didn't notice it. You know what I'm trying to say? Yes. You just went about your business and, fishing stuff everywhere. Everything was related to fishing. The hardware stores had all the gear that you would need for that. And there were stores that were, that just had gear for fishing. That's one of the things that I really miss, is that we've evolved into a tourism economy.
Yes.
And we're losing the connection to what made us so well loved as a community. It's still there. Thank heavens we still have the Maritime Festival.
Yes.
And things like that, the East End Seaport. But the people that are coming out here to visit are, even the ones who are coming to live here, aren't really feeling the same connection. No. And, hopefully their kids will get it, but it has to be instilled somehow. And when I was in 3rd grade, or 3rd or 5th, there was one of the girls, her father went out boating and they went out fishing, and it was bad weather and it was winter, and it was just a small boat. It wasn't a big fish. It was just out in the bay on a little runabout. And they got caught. They never came home, and it took them a long time to find them. I don't know what the details were. I guess they finally were found, but those kinds of things happen kind of. I don't want to say regularly, but that was the kind of thing that occurred. We were very focused on the water and potato farming. There was potato farming. There were potato trucks everywhere, and you always had to worry on Sound Avenue, getting stuck behind a potato truck if you were coming or going, because you'd never get around them. They were big, and there was a lot of there was a lot to it. Yes. But now fortunately, the cider family is keeping the potato industry alive with their North Fork chips. I mean, there's
Yes.
other still growing stuff, other winter vegetables, but the potato aspect of it really, thank you, cider family, because
Yes.
it's keeping our history alive in that way.
Yes.
And then we evolved into the vineyards. I
vineyards.
remember Hargraves when they first opened and first started growing.
Mhm.
Why did Alex choose it? He said because Cutchogue is the sunniest place in New York, so he decided to to grow the first ones there. Now that's Borghese Vineyard.
Mhm.
Is Hargraves. But Hargraves, he's a pioneer. They were the pioneering family of it.
Yes.
And the Mudds also, the Mudds family, who my sister ended up working for. She started out doing some work with Hargraves initially, and then, her career stayed in the winery, the vineyard industry, so she's still there, but it was really Mudds, and because Mudds was here too, but they're a vineyard management company, so you don't
Yes.
they don't have a winery or anything, and Hargraves. And you've seen it all evolve from
Yes.
there,
Yeah.
So once we started evolving to that, it was kind of a no-brainer that we would start getting this tourism kind of vibe, because now you want the restaurants and the places to stay to support that.
Yeah.
But we don't have the kind of hotels we used to have. I'm not even old enough to remember, but old timers would talk about how we had a couple of big hotels. I mean, there was the Orient Hotel, which was out in Orient. I think we had, and there was the Beachcomber, which was over by Duck Pond Road, and the Soundview. Well, that's still there and big. But it was,
there were a lot.
There were a lot more, and we complain about, we're worried now about having having the Airbnbs, and we don't want new hotels coming in, but actually we do. And we didn't talk much. We're talking more about my childhood in the 70s, but I'm president of the North Fork Chamber, and the reason I am is because I want to help the community figure out how to maintain its history and its historical character while still fostering a strong economy. Because if we don't do that, we're going to lose what we had, and it's not going to be the place we love. Even the people who've come here don't realize that, if they don't work to foster that, they're going to lose what they love about what the North Fork is,
Yes. I still wanted to talk about, even for you coming out of high school.
Oh boy, this is like a world history thing. Okay, out of high school, and what did I moved to East Hampton. What were you
thinking of?
Okay, so my childhood sweetheart, not my high school sweetheart, I should say, I didn't date anybody in Mattituck. I ended up meeting somebody. I joined Civil Air Patrol because Civil Air Patrol met in West Hampton Beach. And I wanted to fly in a helicopter. So my brother-in-law, my oldest sister's husband, the one who's 18 years older, he was involved with it and needed to recruit cadets. So he talked me into it. So I went and I met this guy from East Hampton. His name was Dave. I guess his name is still Dave. I think he's still with us. And we just, through Civil Air Patrol, we hit it off, and we kept meeting through Civil Air Patrol. We started dating. He was my first boyfriend. He lived in East Hampton. I loved East Hampton. East Hampton back in the 70s was not at all what it is now.
It is today.
It was a very local place like here. And I just enjoyed being able to spend time over there. We were together a long time. It was a very tumultuous relationship. And we ended up, I went off to college. We broke up and we got back together. We break up every summer, mostly because he wanted to chase girls, but then I'd get a boyfriend, just a summer thing. And he would be all jealous, and he'd, have to, so he'd spend all summer chasing me. And I'm going, you wanted the freedom, right? So anyway, that evolved into, spending a lot of time in East Hampton. Spent a lot of, in North Fork too, but East Hampton. So that's how my experience with the Shelter Island Ferry. I spent a lot of time on the ferry, and we ended up getting married eventually. But so I spent a lot of time. My dreams were I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. my dad, because of his experience with, I guess they call it PTS now, but it took years to manifest itself. He had some health problems while I was in college. So I ended up coming home before I finished college, just before I was due to do my semester in Europe. And I was all set to go study in Bonn, and that would have been great, Bonn, Germany. And I was really but I got into radio. Actually, back to the high school part, I was the publisher, the editor of the Mattituck. That was the school newspaper. But back then, we didn't have computers. We had typewriters. And we would sit in the typing room after class and once a month, we'd put this paper together. And it was, in order to get it justified and everything, I said, we didn't have computers. We didn't have any fancy, publishing equipment. We would have to count how many characters we had to type, and then know how many characters were in a column, and then we would count how many. All right, so the sentence that we were putting on that line was, let's say, 20 characters, and we needed 30. We'd have to figure out where to put the spaces in between the words. So it was a long process, but it was cool. It was small. We didn't have a lot of people involved with it. It was really small town. Remember, my class was 120, and a lot of them were involved in sports. So if you were involved in sports, you didn't have time for that kind of stuff. But those are the clubs that we got involved with. And so I wanted to be a reporter. I liked to write. I loved photography. I came upon photography back when I was 4 years old. My sister Alice, 10 years older, got a Polaroid land camera for Christmas, and I kept, going up and taking a picture, and asked my father to pull the film out, and I used up all of her film that day. So I guess everybody figured out that I was the photographer. She was too. She, she was always taking pictures, but I had a passion for it, and I'm still, I'm a photographer. I became a wedding photographer later in my life, and after my town career in Southampton town, but I love to write. I love a turn of phrase. I love a great turn of phrase, and so I knew I wanted to be in communications, be a reporter. And I really enjoyed that. I didn't realize foreign correspondent that I'd be involved in politics and all that. I didn't want that. I wanted to write the nice lifestyle stories, the feature stories, the feel good stuff about, saving the dog, and, the really pretty flowers in the garden, and, romances. I loved romances. I still do. Pride and Prejudice is one of my favorite stories. Yes. And Bridget Jones' Diary is, the modern day version of it. And my husband knows, he rolls his eyes. I go, it's time for a Colin Firth Film Festival, which means that we're spending the week watching Pride and Prejudice and Bridget Jones, and we'll put in Love Actually. It's usually around Christmas time, but I just, I love that feel good stuff. So, yes. Anyway, what did I do after high school? So Dave and I, in our tumultuous relationship, we finally decided when I was around 23 to get married. But in the middle of all that, I did not go into newspapers. I went into radio, because in college, the school newspaper, they were very stuck up, and even though I'm there for journalism, they wouldn't welcome me in. I had to pass all these qualifications to even write there. And I'm going, this is school. This is where you learn. So I should at least be allowed to be part of the staff. So anyway, I met somebody in the cafeteria. She goes, oh, yeah, they're all stuck up. But she worked for the radio station, WRKC Radio, King's College. And she was the news director, and she was a senior. I was a freshman. And she goes, they're going to need somebody in the news department once I go. So she pulled me in, and I'm like, I thought radio people were gods. I used to listen to WLNG, do a little bit of work for them now, but I used to listen to WABC, all of those, and Cousin Brucey, and they were like gods coming out of a speaker on your table. We didn't have we were just getting into the big stereo systems then, but so to have the opportunity to work in radio was amazing. And even though I can talk a mile a minute now, my first 5 minutes of doing DJ work, not news when you're reading the script, that was easy. But I was given 5 minutes at the end of somebody's show to try it out. To this day, and I'm about to be 62 years old, it's the longest 5 minutes of my life.
Yeah.
But
That was your first time
it was my
on
first
air.
time in front of a microphone on the air trying to talk and figure out what to play. Because you had to talk and then you had to press the button to start the record. It wasn't
Yes.
it wasn't as easy as now. You press a button on a board and there it is on a computer. You were holding with your thumb, you were holding the record so it wouldn't spin. And then as you're talking, go, oh, and up next we have Squeeze, Another Nail in My Heart. And you picked up your thumb and then the music started. And that's how you did it. It was all with a turntable. Kids, you remember what turntables are? On vinyl. It was great stuff.
Yes.
So I decided I wanted a career in radio. And I did come home. I loved being here on the North Fork. The real opportunities in media. And I did have an opportunity to go to work for ABC News. I knew somebody who was there. I could have interned, not, and I didn't want to be in the city. I wanted to be out on the East End. Really wanted to be around this environment, the small town thing. I didn't want to get lost in the big city. I liked visiting the big city, but I felt like, you're anonymous in the big city and it's a lot of work, a lot of cutthroat stuff. It still is. So an opportunity came up to work at WBAZ Radio when they were first in Southold with a big satellite dish. And I did some on-air work there, although most of it, because it was piped in by satellite, the DJs were somewhere else. But you had breaks in the, certain breaks in the hour. And I did some news, I did some radio production, and I became the traffic manager. Traffic manager meaning that's the person who puts the ads on the log so that they run at the right time. I wasn't talking about how many deer were not walking down Route 48 or what the traffic was, if there was any backups or anything. That's not the same thing. So that's what I did in my early 20s and after college. I didn't really finish college, but I was able to continue on my career. And I had a nice career in the media for quite some time. I WBAZ for a couple of years, and Dave and I got married and I moved to East Hampton. And then I started working I took a little break, worked for a real estate office, but it was fun. Met some famous people, Paul Simon, Billy Joel. I got to sit at O'Malley's with Billy Joel one evening in the middle of January. Christy was out of town. They were still together. So it was the 1989, I think it was. Yeah. Anyway, so, you got to meet celebs and that was fun. Dudley Moore, I remember meeting him. I'm trying to think of other. Dudley Moore do you remember him? Mickey and Maude. He was a really funny actor. Arthur is the big movie he was known for.
Yes.
He was a short guy, drunk, he played a drunk in Arthur. And it was, my husband's name is Arthur. He loves that movie. He thinks he's Arthur. I'm like, well, you don't have his money, but that's okay. Anyway, it was but they were fun people to meet that way. And so, I got to, also Dave's father was involved in local politics. So I got a taste of politics then. And so after the real estate part, I went to work for Suffolk Life newspapers, which is no longer around, but I covered the Southampton and East Hampton. And that was politics. I got to do feature stories too, but that was covering local government. So I got to know, I really got to know politics then. And I was hired to be and then Fred Thiel, who has just recently retired, he was the county legislator then. But we hit it off when I was covering his campaign, and he needed a legislative aide at one point. And the reason why the media thing, this is why I didn't stay in it. There's no money in it. There's no money in media out on the, unless you're in a big market.
In the city.
In the city, right. I mean, or even, further west.
Yes.
You really couldn't make a seriously living wage unless you were in sales. And even that, it's a bit of a struggle. So again, I wanted to stay out here. So Fred offered me a job as a legislative aide for him in his district office with the Suffolk County Legislature. And it was tripling what I was making at Suffolk Life. So, and it really, my ex's father, Bruce Collins, he kept saying, he used to call me Judith, get a state job, you want a pension. I'm going, oh, I'm a reporter. I have to be independently minded and I can't be seen to be biased. No, I can't. Well, he probably orchestrated a little bit of it, but I took the job with Fred and I stayed in government. It turned out, and folks, if you're listening, young people, if you're listening, if you get a chance to get a civil service position, work hard at it. It's a good job and be serious about it, but take it because you get a pension. And then, and that's one of the things I'm most grateful for was that, here's another part of, God in taking me on a journey. Dave and I didn't stay together. By the time I was 30, we split, but, and now I'm with my guy for 30 years. Now you know how old I am. Oh, I said it already, didn't I? But even though I had him in my youth, it was the 80s, right? And it was very tumultuous. Once we split and managed to get through that terrible divorce, I'm with my husband, Arthur McCleery. And actually, Artie's, we call him Artie, his dad was the postman here in Greenport for decades. And that's Artie McCleery. He just died in 2024, but he retired about 10 years ago. But he used to walk 8 miles. He was the guy who walked, who delivered your mail here. If you were here 10 years ago, you knew him. And he actually was featured on News 12 at one point for being the oldest letter carrier, walking the longest route. Yeah, oldest on Long Island. And there was somebody who was older, but eventually, anyway. So that's the second phase of my life, right?
Yes.
But the thing about getting a pension is that is the thing. Yeah, politics and government, there's a lot of it. It can be hard. And it's like corporate, but in a different way. Your job is really, really protected, even if you're not great at it. And so you work with people who are kind of dead wood, but you work with people that you love too. And you work with the community. I mean, I worked for Southampton Town. After Fred moved on from the legislature, he became Southampton Town supervisor. I went and he hired me as the recycling coordinator. This was in the 90s when recycling was just becoming a thing, and I became the person who ran the recycling program. There's someone else running the garbage disposal, but I was educating the community on reduce, reuse, recycle. And I got that, believe it or not, through Dave. Dave and I, for a brief time, ran a business. We would pick up because they wanted the recyclables picked up separately. So Dave would drive around the very rich part of East Hampton and pick up the recyclables. And so I understood that. And that's how I qualified for the job. You have to have qualifications. But now I'm 62, and just last year I was able to retire. I was eligible. My pension came up, and finally had enough years in. And now I'm doing what I love to do, photography, working with the North Fork Chamber, helping the businesses here. I mean, I'm doing my own freelance work. So I'm a freelancer, communication, photography, writing, put me wherever you find me kind of thing. I'm a communicator. I help people figure out their social media. I take pictures. I go shoot some small intimate weddings. I do portraits, and I love to do pet photography, the dogs. My husband and I do pet photos with Santa at the Cutjog Library every December. And I tried to resign when I was retiring last year. They said, no, you can't. It's too popular. And it's fun. The dogs are so much fun to take pictures of. They look at Santa like, what is that? And it's a delight. Pursue the joy, folks. Really pursue the stuff that makes you happy, because somehow or other you'll find a way to help you make money at it too.
Yes, definitely. And then was that the last job you had, was that with Southold Recreation Department?
Yes. So what happened was I moved from being a recycling coordinator in Southampton Town to I became the grant writer. And then and that was good. We got a couple of nice grants. I got a $6 million grant for historical preservation for something over in Bridgehampton. We had, I had a couple of things I'm proud of over there, but there was a big deficit, and they had to let some people go, and grant writing wasn't as big as a deal as some of the other things. But it was time. It was really time for me to move on. I worked for Southampton for 15 years. And then I had about 3 years in the Suffolk County Legislature. So I needed 2 years to get to 20, which is like that one of the magic thresholds for civil service, to be able to have a good pension. And so I just wanted 2 more years. And I had been, while I was working for Southampton, I was teaching a photography course through the Southwold Recreation Department. Ken Reeves was the recreation supervisor then. And it was just, I wanted to, keep my hand in photography and help people. You don't know what you don't know. And I learned the hard way with digital photography that you can really mess up your original photos and lose them forever. It's not like film where you have the negative in a drawer somewhere. So I started teaching people. I started helping people learn how to use their cameras and learn how to use simple Photoshop. And I got good at it when I was, that was my side gig, the photography part when I was working in Southampton. So, then I knew Ken, and they needed a secretary there in the office, but it was only part-time. So I had to work 4 years to earn 2 years of credit in the pension system. And by the time I was there 4 years, well, I ended up working there 14 years in the end. So it was, I was there a lot longer than I expected, but I was just earning my credits. And it was part-time, so it allowed me to do my own freelance work, So I was really there in the mornings. And what I really enjoyed about it was I got to see everybody in the community, People would come in for all sorts of classes. And I helped brainstorm and actually set up some of the classes that we had, There were exercise classes. Oh, there were really popular exercise programs there. And then one of the things that was really funny was when pickleball was just starting. They worked for they tried to get pickleball and we managed to make it happen. The current recreation supervisor, Janet Douglas, she's a Greenport native. She went to Greenport High School. I guess she's an Orient native, but she went to Greenport High School. She's people know Janet, I know, and so together she was leading, ran the beaches and all that, but the pickleball program just kind of grew and grew and grew, and to the point where the people who, people wanted to play pickleball so desperately, learn it so desperately. We found a couple of really good instructors. We would have lines out the door for people trying to get into a class that had 12 slots in it. It was unbelievable. We had wait lists that were, 30 people on the wait list, that kind of thing. Pickleball exploded. And, that's what I have to say. We would joke, Janet and I, it's like a cult. Once you get wrapped up in this pickleball thing, you're so into playing it and getting the opportunity to play it, you lose track of your manners when you're trying to sign up for the class. I must be in this class. No, you've got to let me in. There was a lot of that. So that's the humor end of it. But it was just great to see people on a regular basis. The people that came in every week for their exercise classes, or, we had painting classes, and people would say, oh, I learned so much from the instructor, and I really loved this. We really loved to learn it. People were so happy. It was a happy place. Happy. In the end, it was always a good experience. And, if you worked in the tax assessor's office or, town board, you get a lot of complaints. People have problems you need to solve. But at the recreation department, you're just helping people sign up to have fun. So I enjoyed that part. It really did.
Definitely. Did we kind of skip over that you did get involved in local government?
I mean, you want to do that? Sure. We can talk the politics end of it.
If you want to, yeah.
So Dave's father, the politics end of things, I got into local government through politics, and I never thought I would. I was the least interested person in politics. I was a registered independent. I didn't even really want to register to vote back. I didn't understand how important it was. But then all of a sudden it clicked, and I did. And I realized your voice is your vote. And if you don't vote, don't ever talk to me about any problem you have with the government if you're not voting.
Yes. Because
you have ignored the number one, I think, responsibility that you have to be an American citizen. And all politics are local. So vote local. Vote in the local races. Yes, the people you're voting for. Even more important, how good or bad they'd be at that role that they're asking for. What their skill set is, because, you might see them in the, you might have went to school with them. then again, maybe your kids go to school with their kids. And so you see, you actually personally know them. You have a personal experience with them. But how did I get involved in politics was, so Dave's father, my first husband's father, Bruce Collins, had been highway superintendent in East Hampton and had been at one point, I believe, East Hampton town supervisor in the 60s. He was in politics. He was involved in a lot of things that helped make what Suffolk County is, because that's what it was. You had 10 towns in Suffolk County, and he was one of 10 of, he was a leader in 1/10 of it. So that's where I learned about politics. I also realized when I started paying a mortgage, I was an idealistic, Democratic-minded person, but I never registered with a party. I was independent, because remember the reporter part, unbiased reporter. And then I started paying a mortgage. And I realized it's great to be idealistic, but you have to be realistic too. And, so you're paying a mortgage, which means you're paying taxes, which means that you can't give everybody everything just because they want it. There has to be economy involved in it. You have to look at the economic aspect of it. So that's where I clicked with Fred. And one of the things with Fred Thiel was that he understood that too. We use the word progressive differently now, but I'm going to, this was his philosophy, and I carried it. After we parted, we never had we didn't have a falling out. We just went in different directions when he went up to become a state assemblyman.
Yes.
I stayed local and did other things, but he called himself fiscally conservative and socially progressive. Now, progressive now is really moving into the socialism thing. So I don't want people to think I'm...
It had a different meaning.
It had a very different meaning then, right. So meaning that, and so what I would define that as is, I didn't want to see anybody starve or not have a roof over their head, but I wanted to give them a hand up, not a handout, all those cliches. But so I'll help you find a job. I'll help you while you need help for a short period, but that's not going to be your life for the rest of your life. I don't support that. That's not what I'm helping you do. So that was, and I learned a lot of that from the Collins family, when I was with, when I was with Dave and active politics in East Hampton. So I got my job in Southampton with a nod from somebody who had some political connections. But I worked to make it a real, be a contributing member of the town government, and I think I was. Fred was very concerned about the environment. I am too. We need to keep our waters clean. We need to keep our farmlands and vistas open, and we need to stop building houses in the middle of farmlands. We need to stop mowing down the woods just to put up a development because it will make money. We need affordable housing here on the North Fork for local families, for local people, so they can stay here and have the experience that I had. That's what we need. And actually, I have to tell you, Chris, this would probably be a really good chapter too.
Yes.
But we could talk a little bit about it now. But I don't think we can get it as deep as
we might have to discuss.
Yeah, but let's keep going for a little bit. So I started seeing that people who were coming out to visit and then making it their home were trying to bring the city out here instead of assimilating to what we are here. And that became a bigger thing in the 90s and really in the 90s in the Hamptons. And then, here we are probably from about 2014, 2015. And then when the pandemic hit and everybody, just came out. It really made a huge difference because local families can't afford to buy a house to raise their families. Parents are letting their adult kids and raise their families in their spare bedroom kind of thing. And that's not what American life is. That's not what North Fork life is. It shouldn't be. So, how did we get there? So when I left Southampton, I said, I'm not going to do any more politics. I'm done. Right. My clergyman father said, politics is bad for your soul. I said, Dad, no, my soul's fine. I love Jesus. I'm going to be good. Don't worry. But he was right in a little bit, that there's a lot of negativity, a lot of, you always have to be on your toes. Politics is not bad, but it can be. But I will say to anybody who's listening, get involved in your community, get involved in your local government, volunteer for something that will keep your community thriving. It's not just the animal shelter. Oh, support the animal shelter, 100%, adopt, don't shop, all of that. I have 3 rescues at home. And although one of them is not a rescue because, anyway, Jed the Beagle, Wallace the Beagle Lab Mix, and Sid the Cat. We've had Wilson. He was he was completely a rescue. But anyway, sorry, start talking about dogs might go off in a whole different direction.
It might go on another.
However, so then Dennis Noncaro asked me to help him with his campaign to run for town clerk back in 2021. And I did that because Dennis is one of those guys he embodies actually what a local elected official should be. He's involved in the community. He cares about people. He's active in his church, and he knows everybody. He knows how to help people. And that's what government really is, helping people. Our government isn't there to give you a handout or to, I'm not really phrasing it right, but you come to your government when you need help you can't get anywhere else. Private sector should be doing that, right? But you need a beach permit because you need somebody to run the beaches so that the beaches stay clean and pretty and usable for us, right?
Yes.
And that the waters stay clean and pretty and there's stuff to fish for and that kind of thing. So, I said to Dennis, oh, well, okay. They needed help with social media, and I'm good at that. So, and I'm a photographer. So, I said, okay, I'll help you get the word out. And it was a tough campaign in 2021, but Dennis did win, but it speaks to the broader end of it. I used to be president back in the 90s of the South Town Republican Club. It was we were a different group then, but we're still, anybody who's listening and go, Republicans, if they turned off the dial, hope not, because we are the same people who you stand next to in King Cullen and IGA, and we care about our kids, we care about our pets, we care about our community as much as you do. We approach it differently. I'm about what can I do to help my community? What skills do I have? What abilities, what connections do I have that can help my community thrive? And my purpose, my whole guiding factor, my purpose, that sounds like a Disney movie. I don't mean it that way, but my whole, the reason I do what I do is I want people for generations to come, to have the kind of life I had here on the North Fork. Being near the beaches, the vineyards, the potato farms, the farm stands. Oh, I count the days for the farm stands to open in the springtime because so looking forward to it. And I look for the seasons. There are some things I don't get unless they're in season. Strawberries, corn on the cob, and peaches. And when peach season's over, it's my favorite fruit. I have it every day in season. When peach season's over, I spend a couple of weeks just depressed. Oh, I can't have peaches anymore for breakfast. Darn it. It just doesn't feel the same. It feels like...
You don't freeze it.
No, it's not the same.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. So those are the things that if we're not careful, we're going to lose. We're going to lose the people that can support it. You don't just have the farmer. You have to have the mechanic who can help work on the tractor and the auto parts place that can provide the parts. You don't just need the vineyard. You need the fertilizer. You need the people who, or the potato farms for that matter. You need the fertilizers. You need the seed. You need the equipment that does that. So you have to accept a little bit of the inconvenience of living in this kind of community. The fish processing place, it stunk. It stunk. And he lived nearby. You were like holding your nose. You did. If the wind was in the one direction, you held your nose. But that's part of living in this kind of community. And what's so great about what's left over, that stuff that smelled? Well, then you can put it on your crops as fertilizer. There's all of that. So as a Republican, it's about fostering that. And it's not all about social, fixing the social issues we have. We always have them. Do your best to help your own little world. That's, that's the thing we need to remember. Help your own little world. And if you do that, the rest of it will probably take care of itself. And that's what I mean by politics being local.
Yes. I want to pause here for a moment as we move into the second half of this conversation, which was recorded on a different day.
So here we are. It's my birthday, right? September 2nd.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And one of the things growing up, having a birthday that's essentially Labor Day weekend. I mean, it changes every year, but it wasn't until I went off to college that I wasn't home for my birthday. My very first time, my 18th birthday, I was away from home, away from my parents, and I'm the youngest in the family. And so it was a little weird, and it was a little bit jarring to not have Mom give me a hug and make me cake and my favorite pan of lasagna. But with that being said, and oh, God bless her, making a pan of lasagna in the heat of the summer, it's still warm and, at the end of August, the beginning of September, you gotta, God bless her to do that because it was my favorite food. It's among my favorite foods, but really my absolute favorite food is local peaches. And I don't eat them. I don't eat peaches anywhere but if I can get them from a farm stand on Eastern Long Island. Now I realize they may not be actually grown on Eastern Long Island. They might be from, the region, but they're delicious and they're beautiful. And to me, it tastes like summer, and it's been my favorite food for ages. And I can remember as a kid, when I say kid, maybe 10 years old, when I really got into peaches. It would be a big deal to go to Wickham's farm stand because that was really the farm stand on the North Fork. I mean, there were others, but that was the one everybody went to get whatever, especially for fruit. It was mostly a fruit farm then. Maybe still is. I don't know. But anyway, I don't go to Wickham's anymore because there are a lot of other places, and I don't live near Cutchogue. It's hard to get to Cutchogue from my house in the middle of summer sometimes. But you'd start with these delicious yellow peaches, and you just eat them. The juice would drip down your arm. It was summer, 100%. So but it's a relatively short season. By mid-September, it's over. And also when peaches are done, they get mealy and dry, and to me they're inedible. While a week prior they were the best thing that God ever created. And so as I got older, it really became a thing. Peach season, and I would have peaches for anything. Peaches for breakfast, peaches for dessert, peaches and ice cream. Wherever I could find peaches, I had them. Well, now in my elder years, I guess in the December of my life, I don't know, is it December? I'm 62. What does that make me? I guess my husband, who just turned 60, said 60 is the new 40. So I guess I'm just middle-aged, right? Got a few more years to go. I know that. Anyway, now at this age, and probably for the last 10, 15 years, breakfast in the summer is sliced peaches in a bowl with just a little teeny sprinkle of sugar to make sure that if there's any sourness around, that that deflects it. And although most of the time they don't need it, and heavy cream, heavy cream. Why? Look. Just do it. It's like Emeril Lagasse used to say, just eat the butter. Julia Child, actually, he quoted Julia Child, didn't he? It's butter is butter. And, some things you can't replace, and that's one of them. Heavy cream, all those delicious full dairy products. Because if you're having skim milk or 2%, it's like drinking colored water. Don't bother.
Yes.
That's me. Down. That's me. It's way too watered down. Do something else. Don't even bother to try. But anyway, so here we are, as we're sitting here today. It's the day after my birthday, September 3rd, and I went to the farm stand, picked up some peaches, and asked them how much longer, and they said about a week and a half. So you can imagine I'm getting ready to hoard. No, I don't hoard them. I eat them fresh. Yeah. If they're not fresh, don't bother. And the other thing to know about peaches is that when you see one, you just give it a little gentle squeeze. You don't push it or anything. And if it gives a little bit, then it's ripe. But the other part is, look where the stem is, and that should be yellow. Then it's ripe. So you can always put peaches on the windowsill for a few days for them to ripen up a bit more. Don't let it go too long because they will turn in a blink of an eye.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so,
Yes.
but this goes back to Wickham's farm stand. Wickham's, they are an icon here. And Tom Wickham will be the first one to tell you that his family goes back to before the American Revolution and owned most of, that part of the North Fork, Cutchogue, Mattituck, and it shows. I mean, even the families there, Wickham's, Penny's, they're all from colonial times.
Yes.
They really are. And that's really a testament to generational, I'm not sure what the term is, but how generations have preserved the area, the farming and the fishing and the, everything we did. The old house in Cutchogue is a great example of that. You can really see what life was like. And Mark McNish is the curator, the manager, executive director. He's a very good caretaker for that whole historical area too. So,
Yes.
But you want delicious fruit, you went to Wickham's, and that's still the way it is. Wickham's just knows how to do it, and they're part of the fabric. They're not just a community member. The Wickham family is part of the fabric of the North Fork. Especially that part of the North Fork. As you come further east, you get to Southold, Greenport, Orient, East Marion, all of them. That it feels more farming. It feels more fishing than farming.
Yes.
Whereas there's still a lot of farmland. The ciders, the potatoes, the cider family, not cider that you drink with the apple drink. But, that was a little bit more of what you have in that part of the fork, if you will. It's Jamesport. And that's the way I remember it. I'm sure if you find records that predate me, and I'm sure, that's very easy to do, you'll find more detailed information about what each community was. But I marvel at some of these historical photographs and how we looked back in the turn of the 19th to 20th century.
Yes.
It's really great stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, so anyway, I had an extra bowl of peaches today too.
Wonderful.
To celebrate my birthday yesterday.
And it's coming down.
And it's coming to the end, so I'm trying to remember my savor the journey. I'm savoring every last bit of peach season. I remember one year we got to the end of September. When I was with my first husband and we lived in East Hampton, I would make the trek over here to Cutchogue to get peaches because
the ones over there.
Well, they're not as good. And Wickham's was really the peach farm. Lewin's, of course, and they're further west. And there are the peach orchard, the fruit orchard really was Wickham's. I can remember driving down. I always get this wrong. Is it New Suffolk Road or New Suffolk Avenue? It's so funny. I have to ask myself this. I just know it's the road to New Suffolk from Cutchogue, right?
Yes.
So driving down New Suffolk, I think it's road, and people who are listening to this are screaming at me, "It's road, Judy, it's road." Anyway, I drive to, when you go to New Suffolk, you just, you see the orchard all along there. And, back in the day when everybody would go to Legends, used to be called Captain Ahab's. And when I was of the bar hopping age, used to be called Captain Ahab's at a pool table. So that was one of our stops. You'd go to Ahab's, as we called it. Galley Ho was down there too. It's still, that's been there, but that really wasn't the bar hopping crowd for us. We wanted the pool table, and it was really local, very, I don't want to say unsavory, but local, townies, really. So anyway, and you met up with somebody who you wanted to spend some time alone. Sometimes you'd pull into one of the roads in the Wickham's orchard, and if you were lucky, Father Wickham, John Wickham, old man Wickham, he wouldn't come out in his truck and with his shotgun and drive you off the land, say, "No, you're not doing that here." And now they have fence, you can't do it. The deer fence did that. But that section, if you got caught in Wickham's farm, you had a story to tell, So there you go. A little bit more about my preacher kid life, right?
That's wonderful.
But so what were the other things that you wanted to know about that we didn't cover last time?
Just how you got involved with the North Fork Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, so North Fork Chamber of Commerce. So I got involved in government. I'm a reporter by trade, photographer by vocation. I've always loved taking pictures, but communicating, writing, and photography are two of my favorite things. I still do them. I do them regularly. And photography was one of those things that hit me early. So what was great about being a reporter here on the North Fork, I worked for Traveler Watchman. I worked for Suffolk Life. I did work for radio, so that didn't need any pictures. But when you covered something out here, you brought your camera with you and you took the picture. If it was important enough, they'd send a photographer out, but only if it was important enough. It's very often the only way to get coverage, photo to put with the story was you brought your camera. So I enjoyed using my camera. I didn't do any of my own development or anything like that. We had a guy in the newsroom who took care of all of that. I just took the picture. So I don't know. I didn't know anything about developing photos or anything like that. All right. Boy, this is a long, convoluted way to get to how did I get involved with the chamber. Well, anyway, I guess I am. Let me get back on track. So that's what I did when I was in local government, when I worked for Southampton Town. I went from being a news reporter to essentially being public information in whatever department I was in. I communicated with the public and with the press and that kind of thing. So you still need to take pictures. So I started to feel like what my father said. We talk about this already. My father said politics is bad for the soul. And I said, Dad, my soul's fine. And, but I found out, my soul needed some work. I needed things that weren't so dramatic. Politics, even, today it's really, 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 really bad. But back in the 90s when I was really active in it, it was bad. I mean, it's politics. You got to watch your back all the time. It's not, local politics isn't, you want it to be about being good for the community, but you still have to deal with the people that want power for whatever reason they want power. And sometimes it's very good reason. But people have ego. They want their names to be remembered. Their family has been here for generations and they want you to continue that legacy, that kind of thing. So politics becomes really bad. It can get you down and it can bring in a lot of negativity. And all that negativity makes you ill. I'm going somewhere with this. Don't worry, Chris. It makes you ill. And I started going, all right, how do I find a way to counter that? Because I'm still working. I have a mortgage to pay. I can't not work.
Yes. And
so I started getting back into photography. Digital came along and I said, oh, well, digital makes it easier. Yeah, there was a reason why I talked about the darkroom. Now with digital, I can develop my own pictures, learn how to Photoshop, and I have control over all that. And it became much more interesting. But even then, I wasn't 100% sure what I was doing. I just knew that if you had a digital picture, if you had a digital camera, then you could email the pictures. You didn't have to scan them and all of that. So and I got sick. All the stress of my political jobs, and there was a lot to it. Some of it, a lot of people maneuvering and machinations behind the scenes. I got shingles, and the shingles turned into mononucleosis and turned into, they actually tested me for lupus. I mean, it got bad.
Wow.
And it was generated by stress. And I was only 40. Usually don't get shingles until you're older. And shingles is, for those who don't know, is a virus that lives in your body, in your spinal column, if you've had the chickenpox as a child. So when your body becomes very stressed, or very susceptible to any kind of little virus, and that's what happened. So, and it was so stressful that it wasn't just shingles; it got bigger than that. And I was out of work for 4 months as a result. It was bad. I was bored to tears. So I taught myself Photoshop. And then it all started with, I saw a way to take a digital image, manipulate it in Photoshop, and turn it into something that looks like a painting. I thought that was very interesting. So in my obsessive compulsive Virgo ways, since we now know my birthday is September 2nd, I had to learn how to do it. I dug as deep as I could, and I had 4 months of nothing to do but look at a computer and play with my camera to do that. Well, I did pretty well, and I started doing, if I went to a family event, I made a photo book for people. And then finally someone asked me to, they loved the photo book, they asked me to do it for an anniversary party, 25th anniversary party they were hosting for somebody. And I said, oh, well, okay. And I realized that when I went to that party, I was doing the thing I love to do best. I had a reason to go around and take pictures of people. And to boot, I got paid for it.
Yes.
And I went, oh, well, okay. Maybe I could offer to do some wedding photography and some pet photography and all the things I love to take pictures of. So I put out a shingle for wedding photography. I joined a website that was brand new called northforkweddings.com. It was established by a woman who rented out her rooms as a kind of a B&B, but even then we didn't have a lot of them back in the early 2000s. We really didn't. And but so she would host people who came out here and said, "Oh, I'd love to get married out here. Who could I call?" And she was doing that so often that she finally put up a website. And I joined that website, and a wedding photography career was born. And that was in 2004, 2005, just about. And, well, you join a chamber of commerce if you want to get word out about your business, if you want to network and that kind of thing. So I joined the chamber. I was a member of the chamber. I wasn't that active, but I was a member. And then a few years later, my job in Southampton came to an end, and I decided then that I was going to become a photographer. I realized I needed something part-time to be steady, but I decided to focus, no pun intended, on becoming a photographer. By then I was 48, and I said, "Yeah, Dad, you're right." My dad had already passed by then, but I thought to myself, "Yep, he was right that politics is bad for the soul. I'm not going back into politics. I'm going to do what I wanted to do all along, was be a photographer and a writer, and figure out a way to pay the bills with it." And wedding photography was one of those ways. So I eventually bought North Fork Weddings because the woman who started it wanted to retire. She had about 7 years or so, and she wanted to retire. So I took it over from her, and I ran it for several years myself. In fact, I still own the domain name, but the pandemic it was an online listing of wedding services. It was kind of like a Chamber of Commerce website for wedding and event services. When the pandemic hit, nobody was doing weddings, and it was time for it to, fade off into the sunset. So it has. But I was the owner of North Fork Weddings for 15 years. And so let's say 10, 12 years. That's probably more like it because of the pandemic. I took it over in 2010. And then I got really active with the chamber. I had been asked to join the board of the North Fork Chamber back in like 2014, something like that. But I was already on the board of the East End Women's Network, which was started in Southampton in 1981 by someone named Jean Block. That was in the days when women weren't allowed to be part of the the organizations like Rotary Club or Kiwanis, all these networking clubs that men could network with. But women needed to start networking. And so they started the East End Women's Network, and it grew. It was at one point, I think there was like 200 members, and I was asked to be on the board. I was asked to be a newsletter, the newsletter chair, the communications chair, and eventually that turned into vice president and then president. And when the chamber approached me, I said, I would love to be part of the board, but I can't do both. So when I'm done with East End Women's Network, because on that board, you kind of term out. After a while, you can't be on the board. You have to go off a year, and that's a smart thing. I believe in term limits myself. And I ended up. I said, okay. It was 2020. I said, okay, I'm ready to be on the board. So on the board I came, and that was the pandemic. So that was a real challenge. At that point, Linda Sweeney was the president then. Lori Nigro was the vice president. And there was 2020, 2021, even 2022 were challenging years for businesses on the East End, and especially the North Fork. And I was a member of the board, but I wasn't active in any other way other than to attend the board meetings. And, Linda and Lori and Andrea Esposito, then she's now Andrea Bukowski, was and still is the executive administrator. We're never sure what to call her, but she's the one who takes care of all the office work for us. Okay. And she's the only paid staff member of the chamber, and it's a very part-time job. But we have a great board. And anyway, Linda had to step down eventually, and then Lori took over. But then after about a year a year or two, Lori's in her family, someone got very ill, and she needed to take time to, help her family with that. So she didn't have time to focus on the chamber. And by that point, when Linda stepped down, I became vice president. Not for nothing around here. All these boards, you think they're big names, and they are. They're very important roles to have. You think these titles are big, is what I meant. But really, nobody wants to have these leadership roles because you have to, if they're volunteer boards, and you have to have the time to devote to them. And it's a challenge when you're trying to pay the mortgage and you're trying to keep your business afloat. And the big business, big businesses, the ones that have more structure in their business, they've got to manage their staff. So anyway, I'm a freelancer, so I had a little bit more flexibility in my schedule, and I agreed to be vice president. And then Lori's family had the illness come up, and then I ended up taking over as president. So I've been president I'll be going in the middle of my second full term as president. And I did it because one thing I did see when the pandemic came is the newcomers came out. They, this became more of an real estate investment area, and less of a small town community. And I saw it starting to slip away, and the North Fork I love starting to slip away. And I realized that part of it was that, it needs to be a rich environment for small businesses and a business incubator, if you will, so that people who are just starting out aren't just plumbers and electricians and people who clean houses, but there are other things as well, not just real estate people, not just lawyers. That you have people who are run little boutiques or run antique shops or car dealerships or pool companies or the deli or a restaurant, or what are some of the other cottage things? Strong's Marine, that's controversial, very controversial, but Strong's is a key component, especially of the Mattituck area. They've been controversial because they want to put up a yacht storage area on Mattituck Creek, with, you access by the inlet, but the property's zoned to do that kind of thing. So I saw these challenges coming to the business community, and I realized that, if you want to affect change, if you want to be part of the solution, you got to be part of the solution. You can't just talk about it. You got to be involved in it. So that's why I became very active with the chamber, and I'm really pretty passionate about it. I really believe that we need to figure out a way to meld the newcomers in with the locals, the people who have been here, because the people who have been here have lived through all the challenges, whether it's, Front Street gets flooded because of a hurricane and then a nor'easter and then, another king tide or something like that how do those people continue to rebuild? How did they keep coming back? And we know how that happened. We deal with the regulatory agencies, we deal with the town, we deal with the village. All of those things are what the chamber becomes a place to be a clearinghouse for. We don't take any political positions. We do take positions on things we think are important for the for the community, but we don't endorse candidates, is what I mean. But we will go, and I've written a couple of letters about the zoning, about we sponsored forums about how the business community is going to be affected by the zoning of the rezoning that's going on in South Old Town right now. So the North Fork Chamber it came to be because it was, and I don't remember all the names of the chambers. It was the Greenport Southold Chamber, I believe, and then there was the Cutchogue, New Suffolk, Peconic, or I don't know where the divisions were. There was the Mattituck Chamber, which is still active, barely, but it's still active. It's very small. My point is, the North Fork Chamber is the result of all these other chambers. There were smaller chambers when the business communities were a lot more diverse and stronger in each of those hamlets. And the North Fork Chamber just became an umbrella organization, and now finally we're just all different parts of. We have Tom Scalia, who's Albertson Realty, and he and Joe Corso, who ran Peconic House, which was an assisted living facility. He's now retired from that. But Joe Corso was very strong in cut jog. So, sometimes these board meetings you hear Joe and Tom talk about what it was like back in the old days when all the different chambers were separate entities. And they're fun stories to hear, but that's not anything anybody would put on the record kind of thing. And so Joe and his wife Helen still do Christmas in cut jog, and they decorate the Main Street area, and it's lovely. They do a great job with it. Joe and Jerry Ciani, who runs a B&B, and Paul Romanelli, who is Suffolk Security. They're part of a board that plans the St. Patrick's Parade out in cut jog every year. Yeah. And, so those kinds of things, and it's jointly done with the Cut Jog Fire Department. Those are the kinds of community things that people who are new here don't remember the history of it and where it all comes from and why we continue to do it. But those are the things that it's a lot to plan, but it's one day, it's a few hours in that day, but it is one of the most vibrant events. I'm talking about the parade in particular. Talk about kicking off the season, even though it's in March and it can be very cold. It's been 20 degrees sometimes. And it's been rainy and windy other times. Everybody comes out. The fire trucks come out and people come from away. They come from Up Island, and then everybody stops at Touch of Venice, which used to be Fisherman's Rest, and has their have their drinks there, and celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and the fire department's there too. It's those are the reasons, I want those things to continue. I want this to still be small town America. And that's why I'm involved with the chamber. I want to keep going with that. And I invite anybody who, as they say on social media, if this is your vibe, let's be friends kind of thing. Come on. If this is your vibe, come to us, because we're there to support the small businesses. We'll support the big businesses too, but they have more resources. Yes. We get together once a month. We network. Some people think it's just a bunch of networking and we don't talk about important things, but we had the zoning things. We do talk about important things. But I mean, let me take that all back. It's not just a social gathering. We network to, facilitate, synergies. And, we're finding that the Southold Town's EDC, Economic Development Committee, they're just getting started themselves, and we're helping them facilitate what they need to do. There's Southold business operators along the main road there, the business district. They have their own little ad hoc group, and we try to help them. They have the Winterfest, but we're trying to help them figure out how they can, be more cohesive. It's all about, there's not too many cooks spoil the broth, although that can happen, but it's like many hands make for light work. And we're really just trying to help people grow their businesses however we can in our volunteer capacity.
I mean, you've seen that change over the years. Just there's probably less smaller ma and pa businesses than there were.
Yes. Well, I think there's probably less diversity in them.
Oh, okay.
For instance, what just comes to mind right now is in Mattituck alone, when we first moved out here in the late 60s, you had Graby Appliance, which was which that building's gone. It was, it was burned down a few years ago. Tragic fire with somebody using too many extension cords, kind of thing. But there was Graby Appliance. There was a salvage company right next to that. There was a diner where Nofo Roco used to be, and now that's is there a rental place there? I can't remember there's yoga, and Meats Meat used to be in there, but that was a diner. Where the dermatologist office is on the corner of Wickham Avenue and Main Road, that was Esso gas station, Alec, ALEC, Alec's gas station. There was across the street, which is Roy Reeve Agency, that was Bohacks. That was a grocery. A grocery store, yep. And where Handy Pantry is, that was the original A&P, which moved over to where Cardinelli's, put the big shopping center, the Mattituck Plaza.
Mhm.
And I think it's Marketplace now, but it was Wallbaum's for years because A&P went belly up. So in one place, in one hamlet, just Mattituck itself, on Loveland and in that business district, you had an appliance store, you had a salvage yard. Down the road, you had a marina, a couple marinas. You had two supermarkets. Now you probably call them grocery stores because they weren't like what we see as supermarkets now. You had a couple of delis. You had a stationery store on Pike Street. Remember I said that was where we used to go on Sunday mornings to get our hard rolls because that was run by a Jewish family. Everything else was closed on Sundays. And you had Barker's Drugstore, which was on Love Lane. You had a gift shop. You had a hardware store. And that was what I told you about the drugstore. That was where every hamlet was like that.
Mhm.
In Southold, you had Rothmans.
Yes.
They had everything, right? And you had Fraunhofer's, where Albertson Realty's, Tom
Mhm.
Scalia's place. That whole building, it's now broken up into, it's now there's Nicolette's. They just went in this summer. A design place.
Yes.
Feather Hill wasn't there. Feather Hill was a parking lot. Michelangelo's was the only Chinese restaurant in Southold area. We had a little Chinese restaurant in Mattituck. Everything was a seafood restaurant. Magic Fountain used to be Dairy Queen. CVS used to be a bowling alley. Okay, so when you say mom and pops are gone, well, you have the mini mall kind of thing, the strip mall kind of thing that you have there. So there's some of that corporate stuff, but the mom and pops are still there. They're just in different incarnations. So you have a lot of mom and pops that are the donut companies. They're food service, right? There's a lot of restaurants, food service, winery stuff. The wineries saved the farmland of the North Fork. There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
Kudos to Alex Hargrave, for having that vision and getting it going. The Mudds were the next, but the Mudds never had a winery. They are vineyard managers, but they were the second vineyard after Hargrave came in. Mudds came in. Like the Hellenic Snack Bar. I think he calls it the Hellenic now, but the Hellenic was just literally a roadside stand where this very entrepreneurial, very good Greek chef, just saw a business opportunity for people getting off the ferry when the ferry just started. And that was the big Greek community. There was also a big Greek community in Mattituck. In fact, just related to that, when my dad was, he was rector of Church of the Redeemer in Mattituck, the Greek community was growing in Mattituck, and they needed a place to hold services, and they didn't have a church. So, my dad opened up the Church of the Redeemer to the Greek church. Can't remember their names, and besides that, I'm not good at speaking Greek, all the different, whatever the names are, and before they could build the Greek church on Breakwater Road in Mattituck, they used to gather at the Church of the Redeemer. So, that's how communities are built, obviously. But again, that was Mattituck, and yet there's a Greek church right in Greenport here. So the communities were a little bit more insular, probably because it wasn't as easy to travel. We didn't have public transportation. There wasn't bus service between towns. There was bus. It was a bus service by Suffolk County, but you got on Greenport, you got off in Riverhead, or it took you all the way to East Hampton. But an East Hampton trip took you 3 hours if you went by bus. Yeah. So it wasn't like they were shuttling you between the hamlets at that point. You rode your bike, you walked, you had, a lot of the Greek ladies didn't drive. And I can remember that there was some kind of minibus that would bring them from Captain Kidd Estates to, because that was my first job, was A&P, to the A&P to do their grocery shopping, and then back to Captain Kidd Estates. So that might have been the church who offered that. I don't know, the Greek church. So, they're still mom and pops. They're different. They're not the same. There's a little bit more corporate influence, no doubt. some people are coming out here and they're, living their second life. They've made their money on Wall Street or whatever. And now they have some bucks and they want to, do that homesteading kind of thing or hobby farming and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. They're looking for a way to live that simpler life and they have the resources to do it, but they're not 100%. Like, it's not like they're bringing a family legacy. That their family's been here for generations and they're just continuing on. Even the Strongs came out here in the 60s, but the Strongs have a legacy, in Mattituck. I bring them up a lot, but I was a boating kid, so we spent a lot of time at Strong's Marina, pulling the boat out of the water, putting it in the water, all that kind of stuff, gassing up and that kind of thing. The old mill was a mill in Mattituck, on Mattituck Creek. I don't remember it being a mill, but I remember old timers talking about it. There was another restaurant there that was called the Anchor Inn, which was right next to the old mill. And I would imagine, if you look at Mattituck's historical records, that the old mill was the mill and the Anchor Inn was the restaurant, probably. It was a tide mill. So, things were different about that. Strong's Water Club, as we know it now in 2025, started out as Matamore Marina, and that was my neighborhood. I grew up just a couple blocks over. There was no pool there. It was a marina. You drove by, you maybe had your boat there. That's the one you used if you wanted to go out into the Sound, right? Strong's didn't have anything on the north side of the fork. They only had the bay, and if you wanted to go out in the bay, well, James Creek, there it was. And what beach did you go to? You went to the bay, which is, the locals know it as the bay. Other people know it from the sign Veterans Park. You went to the softball games. Then every business had a softball team, and that was at the yacht club. So it was the yacht club right there along the water, but there was a big ball field there. And they just recently took it down because no one was playing softball anymore. But so for insurance purposes, that's a sad thing, right? For insurance purposes, they, and to reduce their liability, they take down pieces of history. And I guess that happens, it's the way it goes. When we were kids, it was a big deal. We would take the bus. It was a big deal to hop on the 10 o'clock bus and go to Riverhead, when you were teenagers and all, you were responsible enough to do that. You didn't drive yet. And just hang around Main Street in Riverhead. You stopped at Long Island Sound was the record shop, and you'd go to Star Confectionery, which is now closed, but that was a diner. You went there to get something to eat. If you really, really were feeling brave, you'd walk over to McDonald's, over on Flanders Road. That was a bit of a walk, but, McDonald's, that was a big deal in the 70s. We didn't have
anything out
there
here
wasn't anything, we didn't really have any fast food places. I'm trying to remember when Drosso's started serving, stuff from a snack bar point of view. They had their miniature golf, and that was a big thing to do. As I said, you rolled up the sidewalks at 9 o'clock, and that was in the late 70s, early 80s. It started getting a little bit more active as summer people started becoming year-rounders a little bit more, looking for more business opportunities. But one of the jobs, one of the careers, if you will, here, one of the industries is the bayman. That's really suffered over the last 40 years. When the brown tides hit the Peconic Bay, that really decimated everything related to local people plying the waters of the Peconic. It's great to see the oyster beds coming back and the little oyster farms here and there. That's wonderful to see, but we need more. We need to figure out a way to get the small commercial, the baymen, the small commercial fishermen thriving and vibrant and make that something that, that you can raise your kids to do, not just as a side hustle, but as the real thing,
Yes. Definitely.
And that's, it'd be great if the chamber could help people with that too.
Yes. And more so for you mentioned some things, but just looking ahead, what are your personal hopes for the future of the North Fork and its community down the line?
Well, I said it before. If you love the North Fork, be a North Forker. My hope is that anybody who has I'm addressing this a lot because I see a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who decides to make this their home, yes, I'm one of them. The North Fork is very welcoming to people who decide to adopt this as their home, but don't try to turn it into where you came from. Try to assimilate to what we are here. And that's everybody. That no matter what socioeconomic level you are, no matter what political persuasion you are, no matter how you feel about, social issues and, political issues, in the end, we're all a community. And we need to work together to keep that community strong. I want young people to feel that they have a home here and that they can build a home here without working their tails off and sending their kids to daycare and missing every single soccer game or special event, because in order to pay the bills to help them have a good childhood, that you can't attend because you're working and you're always working. I'd like to see a way that we can make the good parts of the 1950s and the 1960s, where mom stayed at home and dad went to work, and he had a really strong nuclear family. I'd love to see that become more of what the North Fork is again. And at the same time, real career opportunities. Even when I was coming of age, the only reliable places to get a job that you knew you had a future in, where you'd get a pension, is local government or the school district or the hospital. There wasn't anything else. Yes. You had to really hustle, and you weren't sure what that would bring you. And some of us didn't really learn that in school either. That's the other thing, is I think we need to work harder in making the schools be more, and this is a broader picture. This isn't just the North Fork, but I was floored when I learned that they took out home ec and they took out shop for preteens, or the 7th and 8th graders. And I was also amazed that, and even when I was there, they didn't really focus on it. We all need to learn these life skills. Why aren't we learning that in school? Learn how to sew a button on a shirt. Learn how to cook a meal for yourself and your family. Learn how to change a tire on your car. Learn how to be self-sufficient. Yes. Maybe because out here in a rural community, and it really was rural back in the day, in a rural community, you learned a lot of that stuff by being on the farm, right? You learned that maybe the chicken that you were walking around with as a pet all summer became dinner sometime in the fall. Yes. You learned that, and you accepted that. You didn't love it, but you accepted it. You accepted that you had to go hunting for your food. You had to get your food. This is what the human condition is. It's not sitting on a tablet or a device and watching everything on TV and calling DoorDash to bring you food from some restaurant. That's what I hope we can go back to. So whatever part of the that wheel, the cog in the wheel, if we're, that people in the North Fork play, that's what I hope we see. Yes. I want people to experience the North Fork the way I did. I want the kids that are coming up now to experience it in a way that, I did and my friends did, and even, my nieces and nephews now. It's a beautiful place to live. It's a beautiful place to grow up. And we're such a great community. When help is needed, the North Fork steps up, and no matter who you are, we do. No matter what the reputation is about, the division, as we're sitting here now at this time, there's a lot of talk about the illegal immigrants and how they're divided. Well, we're still all human, and while I believe people need to follow laws, and there needs to be laws, that need to be followed in everything you do, housing, when you come to this country, no matter how you got here, follow the rules of the road, learn how to drive, be us. Don't make us get used to you. You get used to us. And if you do that, we're we'll be a stronger community. But our community will rally around everybody.
Yes.
When it's time to step up, we step up. And I think every small town can say that.
Yes.
And the North Fork is one of them.
Definitely. I'm just trying to think if there are any last minute things.
Well, I'm trying to think if there's, we had Grumman. I didn't talk about Grumman, but I mean, Grumman was a big part of, the defense industry wasn't a big thing out here. That was along the rest of Long Island. But a lot of people, that's also what happened, was a lot of people left. I should probably talk closer to the mic in case it's useful. Yeah. A lot of people lived out here and worked for Grumman in Calverton. Yes. And that was also another good career. But you weren't a custodian at Grumman. You were a scientist, or you were, you assembled airplane parts and that kind of thing. So, that's probably another thing to mention, is that we don't have enough of those kinds of jobs that where, yes, I realize AI is coming in, automation and all that. But, if the lights go out, AI isn't going to do you a lick of good. Yeah. So you had job opportunities for people at every skill level and at every, not just skill level, but also, intelligence level. I don't want to sound elitist by saying that, but, as I like to say, we still need ditch diggers. The world still needs ditch diggers, while you still need the people who can figure out, how to make a better ditch,
And I think we've seen where I think people were being pushed to go to college, but I think nowadays they're seeing that there's not as many jobs, and then getting that degree and being in debt is not good.
No, that's not good either. I mean, because you've essentially mortgaged your life before you've even started, right? The ditch digging part, one of the things that guy Mike Rowe, he's been really good about fostering that mentality. And I think the North Fork is a really evident place of that. The folks that have come out, transplanted here from further west, particularly the city area, Brooklyn, Manhattan, that kind of thing, those are the folks that are they're the high intelligent, better term is educated, right? That's a much better term. The highly educated ones, that's great, but the highly educated ones often don't know how to sew a button on their shirt, kind of thing. And you need that. You don't want to hire a servant just for that. And, not everybody. So, those people, very well-intentioned, wanted their best opportunities for their children. So you figure if you're well-educated, you're going to have more opportunities. But the part that nobody thought about was how much higher education was going to cost.
Yes.
And that was always a challenge here. You worked your way through college for a lot of folks. There were a couple of rich families around. There were rich doctor families, rich lawyer families, rich developer families that we all oohed and ahed over and wished that we could drive around. And, someone was driving a Corvette to school and that kind of thing. Ooh, or Camaro. I mean, it happened. Yes. I can remember dreaming about wishing I could drive the Camaro that a girl named Kim drove. But, I know, without naming names or anything like that, that girl, Kim, her dad developed a business. He had good business sense. So he developed a business that became very popular. And, he made some good money, took opportunities where he could. And, he built everything on his own. And that's probably part of it about out here. You didn't have your money handed to you. In the Hamptons, all the summer colony people, that was always evident. You always had somebody who had, who inherited all their wealth. But here, there were only a few of us, and I wasn't one of them, obviously, who inherited their wealth. Everybody else earned their wealth. And you still got up every day and you still went to work, whatever that was. One example, Penny Lumber. The Penny family's from Mattituck. They started out in Mattituck. That was a big lumber yard. That was another big lumber yard. They branched out. They put another lumber yard in Greenport. I may have the details a little bit off because I was young when that all happened. But, George Penny, there were several George Pennys, but one of the George Pennys, George Penny, the dad, as we know it, as I know him, they were part of the Episcopal Church, our church, and they provided the building materials to build the new rectory just before my family moved in, that kind of thing. And so that's what, you needed somebody who had enough business sense to know how to keep the budgets in line and keep a business afloat. But you also needed someone who knew how to swing the hammer. And that goes back to what I was saying. You don't tell, you're not learning any of that in school anymore. Why not?
That's all been put to the wayside.
It is put to the wayside. And I think that's one of the it's a travesty. It's not just a shame. That's a travesty because, if you can't even do something as little as pound a nail into the wall to hang up a picture.
You got to call someone in.
You got to call somebody in to do that. That's not good.
Not good.
It's not good at all. And we really need to foster that environment. And I'm glad that we are. And the North Fork is a great incubator for that because you have farmland still. You have the waterways. So you need boats. You need cars. You need you need heavy equipment to excavate land or to plow some fields. And you need that. You still need that. Unless you want to live in this concrete paved over area. And I don't. I work every day to keep birds coming to my feeders and, the voles from eating my plants. And, we really don't consciously realize that. I don't think that being around nature is healing to your soul. It's very healing.
Yes.
It heals your body, the rhythms of nature, listening to the shore, the water lapping on the shore. That, you may not realize it, but that's one of the reasons why you feel so good. When you have your bare feet in the sand, it feels good to have your feet in the sand. And, for someone like me, I believe in this earthing and touching the grass and those natural things because we're natural beings as well. We just got to get back to it instead of looking at our screens, which I'm as guilty of as the next one.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, but I think that was great.
Good.
But I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today and share your story and all your love and passion for the area and continue to stay involved in the community. So thank you so much for coming on.
I really appreciated the opportunity. I never realized how much I had to say, although everyone who knows me knows that you don't have to ask me twice to speak up. So, But thanks for the opportunity. I hope your listeners are enlightened a little bit and learn a little bit more about what makes the North Fork so great in the eyes of a local. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 223 with Judy McCleery. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.